All right, let's get it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. Well, he's back. We have Mr. Jon Burnett, Managing Director of One Empire Group and political strategist and conservative. Sir, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing well, man. So how do you see it for tomorrow? The Harris campaign versus the Trump campaign. How do you call it?
Well, the best way to look at this is to see what the candidates are doing. And they've been hyper-focused on all of the swing states, as they should, because when you look at the recent polling, everything has been tight. Some polls have Kamala Harris up, some polls have Trump up, but all of the ups or downs are within the margin of error.
Right.
So I think both sides are trying to speak to not just the base, but to those independents and undecided voters to appeal to them, but also trying to give them some reason to actually head to the polls, if not early, at least on election day, because that's the last chance you get.
Let me go over some of these numbers, man, because you're right. The polling data basically is all within the margin of error, but there are some states, for example, like Georgia. All right. So Georgia is an anomaly. You got 2 U.S. senators from Georgia statewide elections, but everything else is Republican: the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, labor commission, et cetera. Okay.
Right.
But they say, okay, well, Georgia, let's call it purple, right? But there were some things that happened in Georgia. You had a special election. You had a horrible candidate in Herschel Walker. You then had a strong third-party candidate when you had Senator Ossoff. Like, there were some nuances that was worthy of mention. But now you really don't have those same dynamics. You have people that are less willing to vote for Chase Oliver, a third-party candidate in the state of Georgia, taking votes away from the Republican. But the last polling data in Georgia, you have Trump at 47 and Harris at 48%. And while, yes, within the margin of error, it is rare to have that kind of close call in Georgia without a strong third-party candidate. And I'm saying that is something to look at, because Georgia, as far as a presidential election, rarely goes to the Democrat. So here we go. We have Biden that inched in less than 1%. And you remember the debacle with that and how the right called it a stolen election, but it was close. Nobody can argue or debate the closeness of it. And now you have Kamala Harris, who did not go through a primary. She wasn't vetted in a more traditional way in our electoral politics, but she's right there with Trump. And I will say, it was the governor of Georgia who opposed Donald Trump, or let's say Trump opposed the governor of Georgia, but the governor of Georgia still won, even though Trump wanted someone else to be in that position. I'm saying that he may be losing his grip, dear brother, in some of these southern states. What say you?
Well, I think you bring up some very good points, and I'm just going to be frank, as I always am, and say that that's one of the reasons that Trump mended his relationship with Brian Kemp. One, despite the pushback against Brian Kemp from the left, as well as some factions on the right, he still won, which means that the political operation machine on the Republican side is very strong. And we do know that Stacey Abrams and others have been building a strong operation in Georgia on the left, which both of those efforts make it more competitive. Hence, that's why we're seeing a very tight polling situation over the last several months with little variation.
Can we talk about him mending the relationship with Kemp? Let's talk about that just for a moment. The last time before last, that Donald Trump was in Georgia, he did a speech where he literally campaigned against Brian Kemp, who's not on the ballot, is a Republican, wasn't at the rally, but he campaigned against Brian Kemp. He didn't say hardly anything against Kamala Harris. He said more against Biden, even though Harris was his challenger at that time. When you say they have mended their relationship, I think people understand this is all politics more so than anything else, but it doesn't seem to have given him a bump in the electorate, with the electorate in Georgia. It seems as if this guy has plateaued out, is what I'm seeing.
Well, I'm not too sure of what time period you're referring to, but in terms of late, he did have a meeting with him, and I believe Governor Kemp attended several events, both public and private, with President Trump. And you can actually attest to this fact, Doctor. When it comes to early voting, Republicans have historically pushed back on early voting for fear of election integrity issues. It appears that fear has been overcome in Georgia, North Carolina, and many other states, including New York, where I'm from. So when you look at the early voting numbers, specifically in Georgia, because that's the topic that we're talking about, Republicans have been coming out in record numbers. And they've been coming out on the left as well. But when you look at the high numbers on the right coming out early, there's a lot of energy, and you cannot accomplish that without a strong political machine.
All right, let me say this. I don't think you can really determine if Republicans are somehow voting in a record manner in Georgia, only because Georgia, you're not allowed to register by party. So you have
How about the exit polls?
But you're not allowed. Exit polls are illegal here.
Well, I mean, they have ways of actually calling people, asking.
Well, you right. You have to depend on a poll rather than an actual exit poll, which would have given you a determinative number, a number that says this is exactly what it is. So I would challenge that. I know that between 65 to 75% of individuals who are voting in this election, it is estimated that 65 to 75% of them would have voted early, which is a different outcome typically than you would have normally. But remember, dear brother, the Republicans scared the Republicans. The Republicans are the ones who said to other Republicans that they shouldn't have all of these opportunities to vote early, from absentee voting to early voting. And the irony of that, at least in the state of Georgia, it was Republicans who instituted how you would vote by way of absentee. Now, as long as elderly Republicans could benefit from that particular dynamic, it was all good. And then when Democrats, or I would say Black folk, started voting by way of absentee and voting early, all of a sudden it became a problem. And you saw a shift politically when it was the Republicans who brought you early voting or brought you voting by way of absentee. And all of a sudden they wanted to then restrict it. Don't you find that quite ironic?
Well, what I do find ironic is that Democrats have said that Georgia voting laws are racist. They suppress the vote. And now we're seeing over the last several election cycles that that's patently false.
Now, why is it patently false? Because more people are voting?
I'm about to break it down to you.
Okay.
Because Georgia has more access to the ballot than many blue states.
Okay.
And we know that several election cycles ago, MLB pulled out the All-Star game from Georgia because of the false narrative that the new voting laws and access was actually racist, when it gave voters, regardless of party, on the left, right, and center, more access to the voting polls, more access in terms of early absentee and things of that nature.
And where are you getting
that is more access than the
I got you.
state
And
of
where are
New
you getting
York.
that information from?
I'll be happy to share it with you.
Go ahead.
But also is bearing out in the results of the last several elections. More than 50% of the registered voters in Georgia have already voted.
That doesn't transform the question. The question is, I would like you to source that information, and then I will source my rebuttal.
I'll send you several articles, but there is no
All right,
greater.
so let me go ahead and give you the response,
including the Georgia State.
Right.
What do you call it? Journalists who have reported on that, and the evidence is actually in the voting results, where more than 50% of registered voters have already voted in.
So let me go ahead and give you the reason why you're incorrect. The law that you're referring to is a law that was passed right after the election cycle in which Biden was elected. Then you had another set of laws right after the first election of Stacey Abrams. So let me give you some insight to it. Number one, we had a lot of long lines in the state of Georgia. They were kind of infamous. They made the news, these long lines. And during that time, you had a lot of senior citizens and in these long lines, and they happened to be in Black communities, dear brother. So 93% of these long lines were in Black communities. And so what did they do? Talking about the advocacy groups and the churches, they decided to bring water and chairs. They brought water and chairs. So what happened in the new law? The new law made it illegal to bring water, food, etc., to those same polling precincts because they provided comforts for mama them. That's number one. That was insane. As a matter of fact, it was so insane that the vast majority of elected solicitors in the state of Georgia said they will not be enforcing that law against individuals who bring water to people who are standing in line. And that is the reason why many said that law itself was at the heart of long lines, and our willingness to help folk in those long lines remain in those long lines. So that's why they said it was racist. Number two, when you say they had more access to the ballot, understand what they did. You see, because of the Supreme Court basically gutting the voter rights bill or the Voter Rights Act, they basically gutted it, which meant counties no longer had to seek pre-approval from the Department of Justice to change a voting law. Counties like DeKalb County and Fulton County and others, they decided, since they no longer have to get pre-clearance from the DOJ due to a Supreme Court decision, they decided to go ahead and increase weekend voting by a substantial amount. So you had many weekends that you could vote prior to Election Day. What the state of Georgia did is they got in, they decided to limit DeKalb County, to limit Fulton County, and then mandate other counties that they needed to have at least one Saturday or one Sunday, whatever the rule was. And then they say, oh, we just expanded it. No, what you did is you limited it for metropolitan counties where most Black folks live. And then you mandated at least one weekend in rural counties where most white folk live. Once again, that's a reason why people looked at those laws and said there's a racist element connected to it. Do you understand, dear brother?
Well, let me explain something to you.
Yeah,
right?
but do you understand that though? I broke it down child style for you. Do you understand what I just said?
And I'm gonna break it down for you too. So
but I'm saying, do you understand what I just said? Let's break it
down for each other. Let me finish. Don't fill
okay, but you don't understand it.
Let me fill it.
You want me to send you an email?
So the point is, right? If you've done your research, you would have known that Georgia again has more access to the ballot box than New York.
He didn't understand.
Secondly, do you know the same laws that you mentioned in point number one, you cannot do in New York? You cannot bring chairs. You cannot bring food. You cannot bring bottle. You cannot bring bottles.
You do understand my answer was about why people in Georgia
not interrupt you.
Said
that's how you know. That's
racist.
How you know I'm getting to the truth.
Getting to the truth.
Stepping all over your toes because you're interrupting.
No, dear brother.
Let me finish.
No, brother, your Stacey Adams ain't worthy.
Let me finish. So again, let me repeat because you're trying to muddy the waters.
No, I told the truth.
Again, the same law that you cited in point number one is against the law in
Wait a minute. All right. Well, thank you. States are able to make their own laws, though, brother. You know that, right?
Your listeners already know that you're interrupting me. Not allowed.
But John, I don't think you understand how laws work. You do know that states are able to independently make their own laws.
Ballot box in Georgia.
Okay.
And the rules that you're citing, restrictions, is actually been in place historically in New York. So
John,
if it's okay,
John, I don't disagree with that.
It's right. So
John, hear me out, brother. I think we're missing each other. And I'm trying not to miss you, brother.
So in your terms,
give me a moment. Let me just ask you a question.
Racist there, but yet in deep blue New York.
But can I pose a question to you?
Where it's more restrictive, you have no issue.
Are you going to allow me to pose a question to you?
Go ahead, host.
Okay. So understand Why do you think Georgia is different than a New York? I just want you, why would you think Georgia is different than New York? It is, right?
Well,
what reason is Georgia different?
When you look at Georgia,
historically, dear brother, what reasons?
They have more transparency. You can check online. You can check online.
Right. So, do you understand why Georgia is different than New York?
Your vote is duly recorded.
Got it.
There's a lot of transparency in Georgia. That's the reason why they can actually report.
But John, do you know why Georgia is considered different than New York?
Have delayed.
But do you know why? No. Do you know why Georgia is considered different than New York?
But I'm here to bring the truth.
Okay. You come here with them tired ass Sean Hannity talking points. But do you understand why a Georgia is different than New York? Do you know why?
They have more early voting days. They have no excuse.
John, I appreciate it. Man, we try to let y'all on every now and then, brother.
I'm just shooting down your points.
No, brother, you're not shooting out a point. The reason why people call the law racist, which you posed the question, is because of the reasons I just gave you.
Right, but
I gave you the reasons why.
Georgia
they said it struck at the heart of Black communities.
Georgia,
you want to bring New York into the conversation when there's a marked civil rights historical difference between voting in Georgia and voting in New York. That is the reason why the southern states had to get pre-clearance before they could change voting laws in the United States of America, because voting in Georgia was different than voting in New York, dear brother. But I appreciate you, Carl. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I got to say, I mean, he's a master at filibustering at times. I missed him. All right?
Well,
we have him back.
At least I'm bringing the truth.
Brother, you ain't brought the truth since 2022, brother.
You catching the spirit?
All right. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you, John.